of the owners, management, or advertisers of Pacific Telestations Inc. This message has been brought to you by the stations of KUAM.
You're watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. Exciting show tonight. I have Senator Tom Atta, who was with me a couple of weeks back on radio, addressing some of the same thing we'll be talking tonight, but he came back here today, of course, with some new information regarding those questions that callers were calling about. You chair the committees on transportation,
infrastructure, lands, border protection, which includes the customs and quarantine and the National Guard, Veterans Affairs, and procurement.
First of all, thank you very much again for coming back for a repeat performance, this time on TV.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Let's start off with, again, some of the great concerns that have changed on the military side. And of course, you have Veterans Affairs, and you're a veteran yourself. You don't have direct oversight, and even if you did, maybe to no avail because you're in the civilian side. But some of the things that have changed recently on the military side are for folks who have who are needing sponsors. I guess they're agent letters that for people who maybe have a hard time even driving or even walking or maybe even bedridden, and they have an agent that again that can go into base and purchase in the commissary or the base exchange goods that they may need. Again, some of the calls we got were that's no longer allowed. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the military commands have really been, I think, a good partner in the community in terms of making sure that the veterans and retirees are taken care of, and also just as generally a good neighbor. Up until just recently, the military actually provided what they called an agent letter, and that is for example, a person who is eligible for commissary privileges, but is unable, maybe bedridden, is unable to leave the house, can then designate an individual to go into the commissary to purchase, food for them without having to be accompanied. There was also another alternative of what they call an assistance letter, where you may have an individual, for example, an 85-year-old lady who, doesn't drive anymore. She's not bedridden. She can still move around, but really is somewhat challenged and needs somebody to help her. So most recently, the bases have really clamped down on that, and it comes as a surprise because up until then, that was really a real help for many people. But I have a feeling that, and I haven't gotten the details of it yet, but I have a feeling that there were probably some abuses going on.
And I was going to say that because, we hear some of these things that happen, and there are probably a few, maybe a little more than a few. And of course, when you're going to paint something, you can't just hey, well, they did it, so we're going to just do a general memo. No, nobody else going to do this. And I know there were folks that were calling you about it, and you were working again with individuals and in their particular needs. You were able to work with the Air Force at this point to get some allowance, right, in regards to that?
Yeah. So in the case of Anderson Air Force Base, they actually allowed, for example, a one-year base pass, so that the individual doesn't, every time if they're going to go to the commissary at Anderson, they don't have to get out of the car, go get a line up to get a pass to get on base. Basically, the individual would designate a driver that would be with her, and so they got a one-year extended pass.
Okay.
And so the individual could then drive the eligible person up to the commissary and can sit in the waiting area while that individual can then go inside to shop. And in addition to that, they also emphasize the fact that, when you go inside, you can request for one of the personnel that does the bagging to assist if necessary to grab heavy things off the shelf or whatever. So they've tried to be as accommodating as possible, but are still, you know, really being very strict about who gets an agent letter. So in fact, they've actually done away with the assistant letter. So you know, they won't be able to have that individual accompany them.
Oh, really?
In.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So how will we deal, because we still have individuals out here who need that assistance. So what are they going to provide? I mean, do you have an idea on the alternatives now that they're going to offer? Because we still have people that really need it. I mean, unfortunate if it's the case of the abuse by some, but it applies to everybody. How do they intend to rectify some of these things? Is it on a case-by-case basis and their particular needs?
Well, in the case, I know in the case of Anderson Air Force Base, they actually have a you know, an official set of instructions that for those who need an agent letter, they need to get a doctor's certificate of their condition, basically, you know, certifying that they cannot. They are unable to go out and do all these activities by themselves. That there's requirements that, you know, the individual that's going to be the agent will have to provide a police clearance, and then, you know, turn in the application. So there are steps available. It's just now you've got to really dot your I's and cross your T's, and you know, I think many of us are used to that. If you have to provide a police clearance, it's good for 30 days. Well, I know that down at Naval Station it's only good for 5 days.
5 days, yeah.
And so if you miss that window, you have to go back and get another
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you're on top of it, and if there's a long-term solution, I know you're working at least on the shorter-term solution. If there's a long-term solution, I'm sure you'll be able to kind of mix and match and, and work with that.
I think the one case that like, for example, I had a visit today from a retiree who again is unable to drive and couldn't get onto Naval Hospital to be able to go get his medication. And he had his son driving for him, but of course the son doesn't have an ID card. And so, you know, it was like, okay, how do we crack this nut? And so that one I'm going to need to check in on. But again, at least they've been receptive to sit down and discuss this, and, you know, let's take a look at the particulars of the case.
And hopefully, again, I mean, again, my assumption at this point is because they've had case of abuse, and they've taken it away for everybody. So again, out there, you know, if they give you the privilege, don't abuse it. Let's switch a little bit to transportation. You have mass transit. If I'm not mistaken, you had a presentation on what you foresee in the future in regards to mass transit, and this has been. I know I had oversight of transportation, and some things haven't changed in the sense that we're still going on a month-to-month contract, so that hasn't changed. Is that ever going to change?
Well, yeah, you know, last week I actually gave a presentation to a group, and the title of my presentation was Improving GRTA by Going Off the Beaten Path. And the beaten path that GRTA has been following for the past 13 years just hasn't worked. And, you know, Socrates had this quote that says, if you continue to do what you've always done, you're going to always get what you always got.
Don't expect different results, right?
Don't expect different results. And so, and this has been going on since 2002. So since 2002, GRTA has been going on a month-to-month basis to procure the bus services. And of course, the service provider is not going to invest, you know, any significant sums of money, not knowing if next month he's going to have that contract and be able to recover his investment. So what my office is looking at is we've got to change the way we're trying to do this. I understand that there's a bid package that's getting ready to go out on the street again. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be for up to a total of 5 years. You know, the GRTA can come in and at any time say, oh, we're going to decrease the services by you know, 10% or whatever, so we don't need all the buses that you're bringing, all that. So it's a 5-year contractual relationship that they're looking at. I'm suggesting what we need some new buses. We need more buses. We need facilities that really are necessary to support your transportation services, such as your stations where the buses come in and hub out off and all that. We should start taking a look at parking garages. But Gov Guam does not have the money to purchase the new bus fleet. We're talking about upwards of $200,000 per bus. And so what I'm looking at is we should put out a request for proposal for an investor to actually finance the purchase of buses to construct the facilities that are necessary. But in order to do that, you've got to give them adequate time to be able to recoup that investment. And so we may be looking upwards of 10, 15 years, maybe even up to 20 years.
Sure.
Or however long the service life is of the assets that they're going to be financing. So that's going to be important.
It's almost a life of mortgage, 25, 30 years. I mean, $250,000. I mean, you pay for a $250,000 home, and that's one bus. I mean, our mortgage is at 25, 30 years.
Sure. And we're looking at a study that was done in 2010. Determined that we're probably going to need like about upwards of 50 buses.
Senator, I got to pay some bills right now. We'll come back, continue this conversation. Looks like we're going down again, off the beaten path, right?
Yes.
Be right back.